If you're really wanting to be the one who's making the decisions, who's raising your children the way you think God wants you to raise them, then it has to be private. Otherwise, there are too many rules that contradict what you want. And even if somebody says, oh, it's okay, or just kind of do it this way, if you really want to make it so that you are raising them in the way that you want and in the faith that you want and with the beliefs that you want, then it really has to be through private homeschooling.
Welcome to CHEA's California Homeschool Podcast, where we equip families with everything they need to successfully homeschool. I'm Angela Lasch, and today we're tackling one of the most important topics for California families, understanding your legal homeschooling options and why choosing the private path leads to true educational freedom. Our guest is Dena Bless, who successfully homeschooled both daughters through graduation and now serves as CHEA's events manager. She and her husband Ed serve together as Bay Area NorCal Regional Advisory Board members. Having directed a private school satellite program for years, Dena brings both personal experience and a heart for supporting families as she helps navigate California's homeschool landscape. Today's episode, You Can Homeschool, Why Choosing Private is Every California Homeschooler's Path to Freedom, will break down complex legal concepts into practical guidance. Whether you're considering homeschooling, questioning your current path, or looking to encourage others, this conversation will help you move forward with confidence. Let's discover why the private homeschool path isn't just an option. It's your pathway to the educational freedom God intended for your family. Hello, Dena. Welcome. I'm so excited that we get to do this podcast together. Are you ready to get started?
We're ready.
Awesome. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about your homeschool journey and what you're up to now.
So we have two daughters that we homeschooled all the way through. We did private homeschooling. They never went to preschool or any of that. And I always tell everybody that if you're looking at the college option, they both got accepted to several colleges with scholarships. So it really does work and it's okay. So we homeschooled both of them all the way through. And then as my youngest was graduating, like most moms and homeschool moms, you're involved in a lot of things because your kids are. So I started kind of evaluating what do I actually still want to be involved in or switch to or whatever. And I'm actually more involved in the homeschool community now than I was when I was homeschooling, because that was the thing I was still really passionate about. So while other things I let go, I held on to this. So I am now currently the events manager for CHEA. My husband and I are the regional advisory board members for CHEA for the Bay Area and Northern California. And I actually run a little PSP now too, private school satellite program. So they're still super involved in homeschooling.
Yay! And we're so glad you're super involved in homeschooling still. Thank you. Thank you. Now, this whole episode is really just to break down the ways that people can homeschool in California. But people might not know that there are different options available. So can you break down the legal options available to families?
So there are different ones, some that are public and some that are private. So a lot of people talk about charter schools, and those are public school options, which you're still under the public school system, you're under their rules, you're under all of that. But then there are private school options where you can actually have a lot more control and a lot more freedom. And one of those is under a PSP, private school satellite program. I know it's got two S's, they only put one. I don't know why. They're the PSP, where somebody else will keep your records for you. Sometimes they have classes, that sort of thing. And they vary widely on what they might require. But it won't be as restrictive. And then there's, of course, where you can file your own private school affidavit. You have your own private school and you just file your little affidavit, which I know sounds scary, but it's not. And it's not asking permission and you're not applying or anything like that. It's simply saying, here's my school.
Yeah, you make it sound so simple.
I know. Because CHEA is there for you every step of the way. So it is.
Well, you at one time were trying to decide what was going to be best for your family. So walk us through how you chose to homeschool your girls.
So the joke I always tell is that from like the beginning, people were like, are you going to homeschool? Or are you going to homeschool? And my answer was, well, it depends on who you ask, him or the person who's going to have to do it. So I was like, I didn't homeschool, it was pretty good. But then I started looking around at what even back then, what the education system was starting to do. And I was like, no, this is not good, not what we want. So I think we kind of started off more like, okay, we'll try it for a year, a couple of years and see what happens, But after a few years in, we just knew it was God's path for us and we were sold out and that's what we did. However, when I was homeschooling, especially starting out, it can be scary. And I didn't want my name on the roll in Sacramento. I didn't want them to be able to hunt me down. I didn't want. So I was coming out of when the times where things were really scary. They weren't quite as bad when I was doing it, but and I didn't want to have to worry about the dates and what paperwork had to be filed and all of that stuff. I wanted to just concentrate on. I felt like I had a big enough job homeschooling my kids. So I actually went through a PSP, which is actually the PSP I run now, because what happened is she was going to retire and it had been such a help to me. I didn't want it to go away. So I went ahead and took it over at that point after my youngest had just graduated like the previous year. So that's how I did it. But now on the other side, now I file my PSA for my school, and I work with a lot of families who do it. And like I said, she is always there every step of the way. And we have tons of resources if that's the path people choose.
Sure. Well, let's explore each path a little bit more. What does it look like to homeschool through a public charter school program versus enrolling in a PSP?
So both of those are where somebody else is going to keep your records and somebody else will have certain rules. The public charter school, though, is almost always going to come out with a lot more restrictions. They give you a lot of money. I totally understand that. And there were some very lean years when that looked very tempting to us, but that just wasn't what we felt we were supposed to do. We felt we were supposed to stay true to being able to do everything from a biblical basis. And so we never did that route. But I had a boss, actually, he used to say that for him, the definition of the golden rule was he who has the gold makes the rules. So so if they're giving you lots of money, then they're also going to have some restrictions on that because they're giving you lots of money. A PSP will also still probably have some things, but they're usually pretty minimal. And they'll keep your records for you, so you don't have to worry about what are the required records. Almost always you're going to have to turn in like attendance and maybe even grades, which technically report cards are not required if you look at the state code. But as a PSP, they want to kind of know where their students are. So if anybody comes asking for their records, they have something to show. They may ask you to do some testing or some test prep or something like that. It really kind of depends. But like I said, it's almost always pretty minimal. Unless you get their really big ones, a lot of times they'll have classes and stuff like that. And then there might be some participation stuff that they'll want for you to be part of the classes.
So how do those options compare to establishing your own private school through the affidavit, through the PSA?
So when you're going to do your own, then you're completely in charge of everything. So you're the one who's going to determine if you want to have your kids tested or not, if you want to do testing every year or never, or whatever it might be. You'll need to keep the minimum required records that the state requires of all private schools, but then you don't have to keep anything above and beyond that you don't want to. And you get to determine completely when you study what, right? So under a PSP, that's almost always going to happen as well. But if your kid is in 7th grade, but they're not ready for pre-algebra yet, you do the math that they're ready for. You don't have to push them into it. Or just what time of year, what days, right? We did stuff during the summer that counted towards our school year because it was all part of what we were doing. But I've known people in charter where like they weren't allowed to count those types of things. So when you're doing your own PSA, you're the one who gets to determine when your school years is, what days you're doing school, what days you're not, what curriculum you're using. You have the freedom to choose all of that to really tailor it to your family.
Oh, you make it sound really exciting.
It is.
Are there any trade-offs that parents face with each of these legal approaches?
With everything in life, there are pluses and minuses, right? I mean, even if you talk to people who have kids in public school versus people who are homeschooling, there are trade-offs. There's always going to be trade-offs. There's nothing in life on this earth that's going to be perfect in and of itself. So with a PSP, you're going to get a little more support, right? You have a little more accountability. So if that's something you're looking for, I know that was something I was looking for at the beginning of when I started, having somebody that I knew I could go to and I could bounce things off of that had been doing it for a long time. So you'll have some of that, but then it, depending on how restrictive they are, you will have things you'll have to turn in so that you meet their requirements. A PSA, again, you have the total freedom to do everything. Some people find that a little scary to have total freedom, and you can do one and then the other, right? Sometimes you do a PSP for a few years and get your feet wet and start, feeling comfortable with it. And then you could always switch to doing your own PSA. Nothing says you have to choose one or the other and stick with it the whole entire time. And conversely, you can do it the other way, because I've known people who do their PSA, but then like they hit high school and they're like, man, I do not want to mess with transcripts. So they go to a PSP who will then help them with work permits and transcripts and all that stuff. And they, flip back over that way. So it's always going to be pluses and minuses. You just got to figure out what works for your family.
And you've already mentioned a couple ways that the PSA definitely gives you more freedom. Like you mentioned, things you did in the summer, you can count, towards that school year. But is there any other freedoms that the PSA offers that maybe other legal options don't?
Well, again, you get to completely choose your own curriculum. That would be one thing. Again, with a PSP, most likely you're going to have a little more flexibility and be able to do that as well. But with a PSA, obviously, you totally can. You can choose, if you're trying to do Christian homeschooling and you want to have a biblical basis for everything you're doing and not have everything separated, then with a PSA, you can completely do that. You get to choose your curriculum. You get to work it in how you want. You can even do the timing different. Like when we did government, we did it with another family. So between the two families, we had 5 kids in the class, and it was everything from like 8th grade to 12th grade, and we took, most of the year to do it rather than squishing it into a semester, because that's how it worked, for us to do it together. And so having that freedom to really space out, put your classes where it works. If you're going to go on a European vacation, well, then that's when you want to study European history, or art or whatever, right? So you can flip all those things around and make it totally just work for your family.
What I'm hearing is that by filing the PSA, it really gives parents complete educational control, spiritual control if they want to make it all faith-based from a biblical worldview. Parents are the ones making the decision. Is that correct?
That is correct. Exactly.
But some people listening might still hear private school affidavit and think it sounds complicated or official, or like you said, scary. So what's the reality? Is it really that scary?
It is not very scary. It is kind of long, but CHEA has a PSA filing party every year. On October 1st at 7 p.m., we will have this year's PSA filing party, and just come with your computer and watch, and we will walk you through every question, every page, so that at the end of the hour and a half of having fun and laughs along the way, your PSA is filed and it's done for the year. So, and then we also have written instructions, and as members, it's available in the digital library. So if you ever, you can't do it October 1st because, you're off to Europe, or whatever, then you can always access it then. See, that's another benefit to doing privately and setting your own schedules. You get to vacation in the off time, so you're not going when everybody else is there and it's super busy.
That is one of the best things about privately homeschooling, definitely. um, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that parents have about filing the PSA that might keep them from choosing that path?
I think one of the ones is that it's scary and super complicated, that they feel like they're not qualified. Okay, this is not an application. You don't have to, there's no test to take, you know. The law says that teachers must be capable of teaching. Well, you know, your kid probably knows how to, you know, tie or at least Velcro their shoes, you know, go to the bathroom, eat, you know, walk. You've taught them things. You're capable of teaching. And there's studies that back that up. They've done studies where they look at like kids in the public schools, at the level of education that their parents had almost always is equals or is very close to what the level that the kids complete and how well they do with testing and where they go. Whereas with homeschooling, no matter what the level of education is that the parents had, the scores, the completion from the kids, all of that is almost exactly the same at that very high level. And it just has to do with the fact because you care. You know, if you're homeschooling your kids, you're home with them, you're there, you care, you take care of them, you're listening to what they're doing, you're paying attention to what they're doing in school, what they're covering, how they're, you know, if they're understanding it, you're there with them on the journey. So, you know, they're going to do well because you're going to keep working with them. Right. Or we laugh about that, you know, they go, oh, it's a homeschool A. It's like, yeah, because we make them go back and do it until it's right.
Very true. Very true. Now, what if there's somebody listening who thinks, you know, this just sounds too good to be true. All I have to do is file this affidavit, then I can do whatever I want. What would you tell them?
I would say without the attitude, that's pretty close. There are a few minimal things you do have to keep track of during the year, right? And if you go on CHEA's website under Homeschooling 101, there's a blog article that talks specifically about the records that you need to keep and how to keep them. So you do have to still fulfill those minimal requirements. But the fact is, if you're homeschooling, you're doing it because you love your kids and you want to take care of them and you want them to excel. So really it comes into, I get to do whatever I want, meaning I can help my child to their fullest potential. So if they're super interested, you know, if they are not school and academics are really hard for them, but they're unbelievably mechanically inclined and can look at things and just put stuff together and all that, you can tailor your education to that. Of course, you're going to help them still get those basic skills that they'll need for life, but then you get to tailor the rest of it and allow them to really explore and blossom in the areas that they're good in. Or it allows you to explore a lot of different options. If they're not sure, they want to try this, they want to try that. You have so much more time. That was one of the things with my daughters that I realized is that we had so much more time to do a lot of different activities so that they got to explore and try things out and see what they liked, what they didn't, what they wanted to do more of or less of, and, you know, that sort of thing. And if your kid is at 6th grade math and 8th grade reading, that's okay. You can work with them in that. You don't have to pigeonhole them. You know, there's no such thing as a normal, you know, kid who's the same across the board, you know, for everything, right? So you get to, again, tailor it and work with them at the level that they're at and allow them to excel in the areas that they're in and help support them and bring them along in the areas that they're struggling in.
So there might be somebody listening thinking, well, that all sounds really good and all, but I just don't think I'm ready to file that affidavit. Or maybe like even you back then, you said, I don't want all my information out there as a private school. And so I know you've already touched on a PSP, but can you just break it down a little bit more? Like, how would it really be different? Someone listening saying, okay, I'm going to homeschool this year and join a PSP. What can I expect?
Well, the first thing you want to do is go to CHEA's website and look at the homeschool directory. so that you can see what's available in your area as part of our support network. Because those will be, if you're looking for those that are really supporting private Christian homeschooling, the ones on that list are going to do that. But then also some of the PSPs, like mine and some others where it's more just kind of like paperwork and support. You don't even have to be in the area, right? Because of wonderful technology like this, we can do things distant or whatever. So, so what you want to do is look through them, contact them, see what they offer, what they don't offer, what kind of restrictions they may or may not have, that sort of thing. How much paperwork are they looking for? What are they wanting? And you really, like I said, it widely varies. So even just like every family is different, every PSP is going to be completely different because it depends on what their families want, right? And who the community that they're serving. So you're going to have to actually do a little legwork, but, contact them. Some have websites, or you can just call or email, and they'll give you, almost everybody has at least some kind of written information or something that'll kind of tell you what they have. And then that way, again, you can find, what works for you. And if you really can't find anybody PSP wise, you can always do your own PSA, but then maybe there's a support group or a co-op where you guys are trading off who's teaching what subjects. You have once a week you get together and teach some classes, or you do park days and field trips. There's just a lot of different ways to still build that community and have that support where you've got moms who are more experienced that you can ask questions of.
And that's very important, especially when you're just getting started. Absolutely. So just one more thing about the PSP. What do you think are some things that people can really gain by joining a PSP versus filing their own affidavit?
Well, like for me, it was that I didn't have to worry about the paperwork. The government changes forms and changes rules and changes stuff all the time. And I didn't want to have to keep track of that. So they'll take care of that for you. They'll make sure that they've got those, minimal records. They'll have that all together. It also does give you a designated point and person to go to, right? When that's one of the reasons I loved it, because Robin had homeschooled like 7 kids, she knew what she was doing, and I wasn't having to try to find somebody or whatever. I had somebody I that I knew I could always go to. Now CHEA does have an educational consultant that you can use as well, but there's only going to be certain hours or whatever, right? So having somebody that you're talking to all the time, and it also helps with things like work permits where you can't do that on your own. You have to have an outside person doing family outside your family doing the administrative role for that. And things like it can make it easier with some of the colleges. Like I have a student right now that wants to do dual enrollment at the JC. Our JC isn't all that homeschool friendly, so it makes it easier for them to say, oh, they're just part of this private school rather than they're homeschooling, and it just makes the process a little easier. So those are a couple of the kind of logistical things that sometimes can be a little easier.
So whether a family chooses to file their own affidavit or join a PSP, what's the most important thing for them to understand about choosing private home education in California?
Most important thing. If you're really wanting to be the one who's making the decisions, who's raising your children the way you think God wants you to raise them, then it has to be private. Otherwise, there are too many rules that contradict what you want. And even if somebody says, oh, it's okay, or just kind of do it this way, if you really want to make it so that you are raising them in the way that you want and in the faith that you want and with the beliefs that you want, then it really has to be through private homeschooling, whether it's a PSP, a Christian PSP, or your own affidavit. That's really the only way to truly be the one who's making those decisions and raising your family the way you want to.
Well, next I wanted to talk to you about CHEA and how they can support families, but I think you already answered all those questions, but that's okay. We're going to go over it one more time. So I think CHEA has something called a directory, right?
I love that you're asking these questions. I'm sorry, but I have been part of CHEA since, I went to my first CHEA convention when my oldest was 3, because I was like, okay, if we're doing this thing, I want to know what I'm getting into. So I've been going to CHEA conventions and webinars and being a member and all that for just so many years. And it's like, I still discover new things. I'm like, oh man, look at that. How cool is that? So some of the top ones are that we have the directory that you can look up, and you can look up by your area, or you can just kind of look up by type or that sort of thing and get a feel for groups that are out there if you're really looking for private Christian homeschooling. The weekly newsletter, the blog, it always has great information. It's either informational or inspirational. There's some great stuff in there, and then talked about what's going on in the state, things that are happening, things that we have going on. The events that we run, we just had the high school online webinar or mini-con. We've got by the time you air this, it'll be fast, but we have leadership conferences. We have things that for advocacy, Homeschool Freedom Day and Capital Day. There's just so many resources, and the mini conferences that are coming up in Fresno and Redding areas. We're really trying to, we're here for the whole state. So we're always trying to reach out and be there. And then you can always reach us on, email, phone calls, and our website has a ton of information. There is so much stuff. If you go into the downloadable forms, if you're wondering how to format something or what, there's just pretty much everything. There's a form. As a member, there's a homeschool planner that you can totally customize, and it's got how to track PE, and it's got different ways to plan your day, and we have so many things, because that's why we're here. We're here for you guys. That's what we want to do, is help every family be successful in their journey. So we try to come up with everything. If we're missing something, let us know. We'll try to get it for you.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, let's talk about the PSA filing party again. You did already mention it, October 1st, 7 p.m. But what can they expect if they join us for that free webinar?
So there'll be a page on the website that'll tell you about it and link you to the registration form. It's free to attend, so anybody can attend. And then for members, it will be in the digital library afterwards, so you can always access it at any time. But we'll all just get on there. We'll have a great time and a lot of fun, and we'll go through every single question. And if you have a question about something that was just said or something that we're doing, you can put it in the chat, or put it in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure it gets answered, and we'll help you walk through. And it's just great, because then instead of this, oh my gosh, I have to fill out this big, huge thing, it's like you go through it with everybody. We'll have some giveaways. We'll make jokes. It'll be fun. And then at the end of the night, it's done. And you're like, yay, that's all completed for the year. I don't have to do it again for a whole nother year. It's always more fun to do it with friends, right?
Yes. And you're going to find your tribe. You're going to find your people all throughout the state, because we're all going to be on that webinar together.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any last words to somebody who's listening who might be saying, well, that was all great. Other people can do this, but I just don't think I can do this. Any encouraging words for them?
You really can. You really can. There is so much support and help. It's not like you're out there on your own with nobody around and no way to get any help. Whether it's through CHEA, it's through a PSP, it's through a support group, it's through a co-op, it's by coming to an event. There are so many different ways to get support and help. You really, really can do it. And God gave you your children, right? There's a reason he put your family together. He put your particular kids with your particular parents. He had a plan, and he knows what he's doing, and he's not going to give you kids that you can't handle or something. You really, really can do it. And when you look at, the practical side of it, I had friends all the time who were like, oh, I could never homeschool and spend all that time. And I'm like, well, how many hours did you spend doing homework with your kids yesterday? And they're like, Oh, like 3, and I'm like, well, we were done with school, and then we were on to other projects, whether sewing or crafts or, hiking or whatever, there's all these different things you can then do. So you really, really can do it. And we're here for you. People will support you. It's possible. I promise.
Well, thank you so much, Dena. I think that is going to be super helpful to somebody trying to figure out how to privately homeschool in California. And yes, I think we've plugged it enough, but CHEA is here to help. Hopefully, we will see a lot of these listeners at the PSA Filing Party on October 1st.
See you then.
All right. Thanks, Dena.
You're welcome. Bye.
What an encouraging and informative conversation with Dena Bless. I hope you're walking away from this episode with a clear understanding of your legal homeschooling options in California, and more importantly, with renewed confidence that you can successfully provide private home education for your children. As Dena shared, whether you choose to file your own private school affidavit or join a PSP, the private path offers the freedom and flexibility that aligns with your God-given right and responsibility to direct your children's education. Remember, you don't have to navigate this journey alone. CHEA is here to support you every step of the way. Mark your calendars for CHEA's October 1st PSA Filing Party. It's not just about paperwork. It's about connecting with other families, getting your questions answered, and taking that confident step into private home education. If today's conversation sparked questions, or if you're ready to explore your options further, please visit CHEA's website, cheaofca.org. There, you're going to find our homeschool directory, resources on taking the first steps, and information about upcoming events. To our listeners who are still on the fence about homeschooling, God has equipped you for this calling. The legal path is clearer than you think. The resources are available, and the homeschool community is ready to welcome and support you. Take that first step. Your family's educational freedom is waiting. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Dena, for sharing your heart and expertise with our CHEA family. Until next time, may God bless you as you not only homeschool, but raise up the next generation of Christian leaders.
Brought to you by thepodcastupload.com, empowering faith-driven voices.